And welcome to our Health Systems panel. My name is Hadi Salah. I work at Mars in the Health Systems Innovation Group. And we have some pretty awesome speakers with us today. And before I get there, I want to ask the room, who is actually an investor here? Hands up. Right, about half. And startups, companies, SMEs? A few, okay. And how many are from Canada? US? Elsewhere? All right, great. So we have a good mix of people from all around Canada and all around the world, it seems, which is perfect for this panel because we're going to try and highlight some really cool and innovative programs and opportunities for, and highlight some opportunities in Ontario that you can take advantage of with your companies, with your investees. If you're a company, please come and check out some of the things that we offer. If you're an investor, you have a portfolio of companies, please also keep what we're going to talk about today in mind for your companies. And with that, I want to sort of introduce my panel. I have right next to me Jennifer Moles, who is the Innovation Procurement Manager at the Ontario Centres of Excellence. Next we have Adam, who also works with me at Mars as Director of the Mars Centre for Impact Investing. Next we have Raymond, who is the Director of Business Development at the Canadian Centre for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, CCABI, which is located at the Baycrest Health Sciences Centre. And finally Victor, who is been with the Office of the Chief Health Innovation Strategist as a lead for policy work. And with that, I'm going to open it up and go one by one and sort of have everyone speak about what their role is and what they're all about, what their organization is all about. And we can do a Q&A that's a bit moderated with me. Then we're going to open it up to the floor to see if anyone has questions. Jennifer, you want to kick it off?
Sure, thanks, Abby. So essentially, I've been in the sort of medical and assistive technology area for the last about 15 or 16 years. I used to be a part of an organization which was called the Health Technology Exchange and was a big part of getting a program which is called the Health Technology Commercialization Program, which is now managed by the Mars IAF program. So for the last about 5 or 6 years, I've been with the Ontario Centres of Excellence, working on a series of different types of programs. So, writing applications directly to government to develop new programs, and managing those programs and doing full administration, etc. My background is mainly healthcare, so majority of the programs that I manage right now are in the healthcare space. I manage healthcare and education at this time, and most recently, probably within the last 6 months at OCE, we've actually diversified our portfolio and have developed a series of procurement type programs. So we have about 5 programs in that particular space. And so we have a program which is called the Health Technologies Fund, and you may have seen the announcement yesterday where we released at an event yesterday from the minister talking about the first 15 projects that we supported through that program. We also manage the REACH program, Advancing Health and Advancing Education, and most recently the Small Business Innovation Challenge. The Small Business Innovation Challenge is mainly for 2 different sectors. They're not health related. However, the outcome of these types of programs, these new procurement type programs, are twofold. One, we support demonstration projects, and what does that mean? That means that we support projects where we're helping to build collaborations between companies and the end user site. So that could be with a lot of our health programs where a hospital is now working with a technology company and they're demonstrating their product in the hospital and helping to build evidence to be used for their technology to be adopted either at that site or potential other sites in the province, Canada, etc., elsewhere. In addition, we also support implementation of technology, which is more a little further down the line, where it's formalizing more of an adoption of the technology. And then we have the REACH program, which is Very interesting, very new, where we are supporting healthcare organizations to be able to adopt new methodologies to seek out new types of technologies that they would not have had the opportunity to observe or adopt to solve problems and challenges within their healthcare organization. So they have the opportunity to go outside of a traditional procurement process and identify these technologies where they can then go through a process to do field evaluation, further testing, etc., and make a determination and a final selection of a technology to adopt. So it's a new way for companies to be able to get early market validation, essentially.
Thanks, Jennifer. Adam?
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Jagleski. I lead the work here at Mars for the Center for Impact Investment. I'm going to, in my 5 minutes, just talk about bridging the world of health innovation and impact investment. The way that I'll do that is I'll give an example of what we did, but I'll tee it up with a few, I guess, arguments on why we're actually doing this. So you have, I guess on one side, the health innovation side, you have governments increasingly asking for the results or asking for the outcomes of their funding. So you have a real shift between paying for activities and paying for output. So colloquial language, bums and seats, to something about, how are you changing the lives of the individuals that you're serving. Increasingly, they're asking for evidence, so they're asking what is working now versus what worked at some point in time. And we're trying to use data, and we're trying to use active performance management of programs to better understand the results and how we actually got to those results. So you have a real need for evidence, a real need for data, a real need for results, and this shift is on the weights and the minds of governments. It's on the weights and the minds of philanthropists, those that are looking to put money into the health system in a philanthropic way. On the other side, you have impact investors. So these are individuals that are looking to place money into a social issue. In this case, we're talking about health, but a social issue that has a measurable social change. And that change is intentional. So these investors are seeking to change something with their investment dollars. And so that's impact investment. And so the question is whether you can bridge these two worlds. But there's not an infinite number of ways in which an investor can make an investment into something and get their money back and a rate of return or compensation for their dollars. And so we're looking at different ways in which we can structure new products, new funds, new ways to put money into the market. Most people know how to make a debt or an equity investment into a venture that has cash flow, has revenues, something that you can actually pay back the investors based on the sale of goods or services. Most people also know how to invest in infrastructure where there's a security in which you can make that investment. But what about the case where an entity is providing a service to an individual, and that service is you're collecting data and you're generating evidence, as I talked about in the whole system innovation, but there's no revenues, there's no way in which you can actually make money off of this. What you're making is this evidence and these results. And so the deal that I'll just quickly talk about is a deal in which we worked with the Heart and Stroke Foundation, whom was delivering a community-based hypertension prevention program. And they want to deliver this service to an older elderly population group. And the intervention is quite simple. You reduce sodium, you quit smoking, you improve exercise, and you improve your diet. And the whole idea is that if you're aware of falling into a hypertensive state, you can avoid heart disease and the chronic disease that takes place. So they have this program, but they need money to fund this program. And traditionally, they're going to governments and philanthropists and trying to raise money to deliver this program. But if we can make the case for why this program should work, and that we know that if we move the blood pressure of these individuals to a more positive state, that the government is going to save money long term, the individuals are going to have better health outcomes and a better quality of life, and potentially, if we can make this attractive to investors, they can provide the upfront capital. So we put together the first of its kind deal with the Public Health Agency of Canada, 11 different investors who are putting up the upfront capital for this program. And if Heart and Stroke delivers against their blood pressure targets, then these 11 investors will get their money back and a sliding scale return up to 8.6% on their money. So it's the first of its kind, both in the health domain in Canada, but the first of its kind nationally. We're operating in Toronto and Vancouver. Those are the two cohorts that we're going to test this pilot out. And the theory of change for us is that if we can have investors put up the upfront money to test the efficacy of this program and rigorously track the data and the measurement associated with it, then we can make a case to other governments, PEI through to Alberta, who are not operating this program in its first iteration, and maybe they will pick it up. They don't need to use a social impact bond, or maybe they will want to use a social impact bond in order to make this happen. So happy to answer any other questions that you guys have on this deal as we go forward, or in the impact investment field as a whole, but that's probably where I'll end my remarks.
Thanks, Adam. Raymond?
So as Hadi was saying, CCABI is based at Baycrest, and I feel like I almost need to start there to give you a bit of context. For those of you not from Toronto, Baycrest is a 100-year-old institution dedicated entirely to senior care. Between our hospital, our long-term care facility, our assisted living, our independent living, and an extremely broad outreach program. We deal with all aspects of senior care. About 30 years ago, we established our Rotman Research Institute, which has become one of the leaders in neurocognitive research globally. And what that essentially means is that we've now really become a key player in finding the issues associated with cognitive impairment, dementia, and Alzheimer's, essentially being the more common terms for that. I think as we all know, however, there is no current therapeutic cure or prevention for a cognitive impairment. Eli Lilly announced their big failure last fall for a stage 3. Realistically, it's going to be another 10 to 20 years before there's the potential for a therapeutic cure, but there is a need for better technology, better innovation in the senior care space around cognitive impairment to deal with the ever-increasing challenges that are being faced, both here in Canada but around the world. As our seniors live much, much longer, and we're seeing much more incidents of cognitive impairment. What we were able to do to try and address that situation is work with a number of governmental bodies within Canada, as well as a number of players in the ecosystem, to obtain some funding 2 years ago, to the tune of about $125 million Canadian, to set up a Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. And we define ourselves as a solution accelerator. We are looking to work with partners across the ecosystem, as well as healthcare providers, industry companies with technologies that we're looking to try and apply in this space. And through our programs, we will fund them to go through essentially a validation, testing on clinical trials, but in an appropriate care environment. Much like what Jennifer was talking about with the OCE, our goal at the end of the day is to give these entities an opportunity to look at whether or not this is something that could address some of the challenges either we specifically are facing or the care providers, which is not always the clinicians, it's the families in many cases that are looking after these individuals. We're also trying to see where innovative technologies could better support the management of care in a home-based environment as opposed to in a hospital environment, which is oftentimes the most expensive alternative and not necessarily the best for the individual. What we do through our various programs is look at some of the current challenges that are being faced by those with cognitive impairment, falls, emergency department visits, and then try to put those challenges out and ask for solutions that we will then bring in through our various programs. And over the course of anywhere from 6 months up to 18 months, we will provide them with the appropriate care environment. Might be at Baycrest, but it could be across Canada or into the US through our network of partners. And if we're successful, and if they're successful, then hopefully we will work with our other partners to move them into commercialization. To Adam's point, however, two of our biggest funders are the PHAC as well as the Ontario Ministry of Resource Innovation and Science, all of whom are very much focused on outputs. And so in addition to what we try to do, we have to report back to the ministries with respect to what we are trying to do. So we're very much about driving outcomes and creating sustainability, hopefully, in the ecosystem when it comes to delivery of care in this area. Maybe I'll stop there.
Thanks, Raymond. Victor?
My name is Victor Castellino. I'm our policy lead for health system planning at the Office of Chief Health Innovation Strategist. So this is an exciting week for us, Toronto's first Health Innovation Week, especially because our office itself is fairly new. We're 18 months into the role now. Our first Chief Health Innovation Strategist, Bill Charnetsky, was hired about 18 months ago. And it's really, our office is a unique role in the Ministry of Health. Our purpose is to improve patient outcomes, add value to the system, and create jobs in Ontario. And it's really that last bit that's really interesting. That to me is the big deal. It's really the first time, I believe, in Ontario that you have a line of business set up in our health industry that's explicitly recognizing the link between our $52 billion state investment in healthcare and economic development. Being allowed to think of healthcare not just as a cost, a social policy cost on one side of the ledger, but as $52 billion where every dollar goes to labor, goes to services, and potentially goes to innovation and management. So building on those purposes and priorities, we deliver on that mandate in a number of different ways. Mainly it's trying to tackle different parts of that pathway from ideation to commercialization, to scalability and adoption. And we do that through formal funding programs, for example, through some of my colleagues here, with Mars Excite, with the Health Technology Fund. Those are our attempts to create certain conversations to target really specific ways that innovation can enter the marketplace in Ontario. Yesterday, our minister announced the hiring of the first 3 innovation brokers in Ontario. So these are senior people with extensive knowledge, contacts, an ability to reach into the health system purchasers, to generate deal flow, to offer advice, to connect innovators with resources. And we hope this will be a very helpful resource to investors in Ontario. Out of our office as well, we provide advice to small companies, and I'll talk about this later. It has a big impact. We've learned just how hungry the sector is for just simple knowledge about how to navigate the health system, where to build clients, and so on. Another part of our mandate is a major shift in Ontario to value-based procurement. And that's a model that you'll see more in the EU, US areas. It's of big interest to us. It's changing that environment from procurement as looking for the lowest cost in the short term to something that thinks of the patient journey, thinks of how to create and add value along that patient journey. And we're anticipating recommendations from a healthcare supply chain panel we set up about a year ago that's about making recommendations to government on how to rebuild that supply chain and put patients and value at the core of it. From our office, we also work with our ministry colleagues on things like health system funding reform. How do we pay for the value that we want to see in order to drive innovation in the system? We work with our federal colleagues on regulatory challenges. We hear all the time about difficulties with regulation and devices and so on. As I said, this to me is an exciting step. The fact that I'm here as a civil servant in a public health jurisdiction and I'm allowed to talk to you about Ontario as a demand driver for innovation, as a test bed, as a business. So I'll talk quickly about some of the lessons that we've learned along this journey in the past 18 months. And I think the first is really that the little things count. That when you're trying to help people understand risk and investment in Ontario, is that little advice. It's our ability in 30 minutes to provide advice to a small company that they would otherwise spend 6 months knocking on doors around the health system. just trying to learn about how hospitals work. The second big challenge for us is realizing that, especially from the government angle, from the ministry, how much of our efforts would be on the cultural front. It's fighting risk aversion, up, down, sideways. It's understanding, what happens at the local level, even though you're meeting CEOs who are telling you innovation all the way. How does that translate down to a health system that's largely risk averse, and your incentives and your fears and your concerns are maybe different from what you're seeing out in the news. Changing behavior, starting conversations, it's a big part of what we do. One of my favorite pieces of feedback we got from the HDF, which you heard Jennifer talk about, was really that out of the 250 plus applications that came through, a handful won, but each one of those was a conversation between industry, between health system producers, between evaluators, and the feedback we got were those conversations weren't happening before, and now they are. That door was opened 250 times, and that was just in the first call. So as we move into our second year of work, our purpose and priorities are still the same. I think where we're looking to really double down is on our focus on value-based care. You see some of this language elsewhere. It's really paying for value. If we want innovation, we have to be a health system that pays for the value that we want to see. Procuring for value, that shift to value-based procurement, and pushing some of the guidelines and programming and really the clarity that the health sector needs out to be able to do this kind of work. And finally, measuring value, strengthening that access to data so that we can define that value in the first place and then measure performance in some of the more interesting contracts that we're hoping to pursue. And that's just a quick overview. I encourage you, if you haven't heard Bill speak, he spoke yesterday, he'll be tomorrow at the MEDIC conference. You can also check out our website at ontario.ca/health-innovation for a full 30-minute speech overview of all the ins and outs of health system policy. Happy to take any questions on that as well.
Thanks, Victor. So you're probably seeing a theme from what everyone just talked about, and when we were putting this panel together, I think that theme came up, and that is really de-risking health innovation investment. If you're an investor, really the programs on offer and that we're going to do a deep dive on will help you basically stretch the your investment to try and de-risk it with our healthcare system, with our various different programming. And if you're a company, we're also trying to de-risk, these programs de-risk your growth and scaling efforts. I want to, before I go into the deeper dive questions, Victor, you mentioned Excite and using our health systems as a driver for economic, as an economic engine. I want to highlight two examples that we're working on here at Mars that I think is relevant to the audience, then we'll get into a deeper dive with all of us. One is Excite. So if you're a company with a radical innovation in the healthcare space that requires adoption and reimbursement by the health system in Ontario, Excite was a program that developed a few years back to basically streamline that process, to allow innovators to bring in the health system on board as they do their clinical trials, phase 1, 2, and 3, and do an economic analysis on that innovation, so that once you're approved by Health Canada or the FDA, you have the payer in Ontario ready to adopt and scale your innovation. And we have our first product that was announced a couple of months back that has gone through that system and that program and ready to scale up in Ontario. So if you have companies or technologies in that space, Mars Excite is a great program for you to check out. The second one is about procurement. So procurement in many jurisdictions around Canada, around the world, are usually a bottleneck for early stage entrepreneurs and startups. So we developed a program that we launched last year in which we are having the health system pull innovation through a design challenge approach that is radically different than a traditional RFP, to allow vendors and providers to work together to de-risk solutions and evaluate them to lead to a procurement. All right, so let me start with Adam, because impact investing is a pretty novel, I think, space that we're playing in. I want to ask you, what is driving the need for these new innovative models for funding and partnerships?
Well, I think that in my opening remarks, I talked about this whole need to gather data and to be able to tell this story about what results we're achieving. And in doing so, you're shifting from the traditional system that, again, focuses on outputs, but you're also, you're trying to ask these individuals or these organizations to do things that partner across sectors, to do things in a new way that they're otherwise not used to doing. So there's a risk that's associated with doing those types of things in a new way. And I think that the field is looking at whether or not private investors, the private sector, can actually assume some of that risk going forward. And there are some investors that are willing to assume some of those risks, and and some of those investors are willing to invest in model risk, which I described the Heart and Stroke deal. I would say that's a new model. So they're willing to invest in the model risk or assume that model risk, and some of them are willing to assume some of the impact risk in that deal. It was that they were going to change hypertension of the target population. So I think that there's a real need for these new models because there's different actors at the table that are willing to do different things, and the need for an innovative way to spark change amongst those actors requires a new model or a new way of doing things.
Great, thank you. And I'll get back to you in a second. I want to talk to Jennifer and Raymond. You guys are unique because you guys have funding programs that support entrepreneurs and startups and companies. Can you give us some maybe highlights about some of those programs and maybe example projects that you've taken on in the past year or that you think are successful? Yeah, go for it. You start.
So essentially, at the beginning of this talk, I talked a little bit about the Advancing Health program and how it's basically merged into a larger program, which is now called the Health Technologies Fund. And with that fund in particular, we fund different activities depending on the stage of the technology. And so we support projects and activities for pre-market approvals, for demonstration, for implementation. So with this fund, we've been able to, as Victor was saying, the conversations are now beginning. We're having more and more conversations of hospitals being able to be introduced with companies that they've never met before. And so the fund in particular, we have developed a theme, and it aligns with the priorities. And so the health system priorities, and essentially is better care closer to home. So how does it impact patients? And so how would a project address and align with that theme of the program? So what does that mean? Looking at things from a different level. You saw that there were 15 projects announced yesterday. These projects are all extremely different. Technologies are all very different, but they all align with how do they impact community care itself. So there could be a project in particular where there might be addressing mental health and working with the police, and another maybe like a Canuck type home, a home where individuals may be living, where they receive support because they have some mental health issues, etc. And so that's just one small example, but the program allows us to look at things very differently than we've looked at things before. So we're addressing impact in the community. How does it impact a person's life? So an individual that may not have identification on them, and what happens with that person if they are in a hospital setting now, and then they have had an operation and now they're released? Who looks after them? So it's care during the time of the issue and post-care, and how can this program support technologies that will track an individual from different stages, depending on, it could be a senior, it could be someone with mental health issues, it could be, it could be one of us. So there's a lot of opportunities with that program to be able to demonstrate something for potential adoption, so they can help build evidence for adoption. So that's, just an example with Health Technologies Fund. And then, like you were saying, for the MARS program, where procurement by co-design, very interesting program, allowing healthcare organizations to finally have the opportunity to look at new technologies outside of the traditional procurement process and actually be able to identify things and be able to adopt something brand new that they did not have funding or an idea of how to even go about a process, et cetera, to be able to do these things. So it's interesting to have, OCHIS on board to help make these things happen. And other ministries, such as the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, where they are looking at value-based procurement and how can we provide further support in that area to change things.
And I just want to make a quick note about the police board project you mentioned. And when I was reading about the awards yesterday, I was amazed that that project basically was involving the police board, the hospital, the community care centers, multiple technologies working together, and that was put together in 6 months basically, and now is funded at the tune of $500,000 or so, right?
So $500,000 is the maximum for a project. Not all projects ask for the maximum, and essentially they would be matching it. And these are financial reimbursement-based programs, so they receive a tranche at the beginning, and then they must spend and then submit claims against their spend. But essentially, most of these projects are $1 million projects for a 2-year period.
To me, the tremendous value is not only just the dollars, it's that collaboration piece that you bring to the table and allow people to work together seamlessly to benefit the patient.
And I would say very interesting for that, because that is truly community-based by involving police services.
Yes.
So something that you would never normally see in a type of program.
Great. Raymond, examples.
So, well, let me start by actually jumping off from a point you made earlier, and several people alluded to in terms of procurement. And when we're talking, we as a hospital are constantly being approached by entrepreneurs looking to sell us a new technology. They're convinced it's the next best thing. And in some cases, it may be the big med tech players out there understand the procurement system that they have to go through. The entrepreneurs don't. And we're in no position, we and any other hospital is in no position to acquire an untested concept, basically. It must go through rather rigorous testing and validation with in that data that is used to support whatever procurement that needs to be done. What we are trying to do within our programs is provide the right environment to do that validation testing, but also looking at where there are gaps, if you will, in the outreach to the innovation ecosystem, and where we would like to see more response from in order to acquire solutions that actually meet the needs we've got now, not what some entrepreneur thinks we might need. And so to that point, we have our first generation programs looking at various outreaches, if you will. The first one that we launched, and I have to also sort of coach this by saying that we only just launched these programs 6 months ago. So we're not yet in a position to sort of talk about any great successes. It's still very early days yet. The first program that we launched last fall was called the Spark program, and it really kind of looked at where there has never been any attention paid to the key players that have to deliver care for many of these individuals, these seniors with dementia and Alzheimer's, and that is the care provider, whether it's the nurse, the allied health professional, anybody but the doctor, basically, at the end of the day, or the researcher. It could also actually include the janitor that cleans the room in the hospital, the room that the patient is in, or the long-term care facility, but based on the interaction they have with families or that individual, see where there may be an opportunity for an innovative approach to managing that care or monitoring that care. We originally thought we would get maybe about 20 or so submissions. We ended up getting 120 submissions. We thought we would fund 10. We actually funded 31 to a maximum each of 50,000. Not all went for the full 50,000, but we allow them up to $50,000. So that program is a total of $1.4 million, which we announced at the beginning of February, and they will have 6 months to 9 months. And I look at my colleague over there who runs the programs, because she's going to catch me if I make a mistake on any of these descriptions. But we are going to give them 6 to 9 months to do proof of concept for these ideas that they put forward. And much like Jennifer was describing, it runs the gamut in terms of what we sell. Some of them are specific to a technology, others are approach to care, but an innovative approach to care. At the end of the day, what this is essentially an opportunity for people who've never been actually approached to provide an idea with the opportunity for that. Our second program is called the Industry Innovation Partnership Program. And this is one perhaps more applicable to some of the entrepreneurs in the room who might be conceptualizing of an idea specific to this target audience, or to repurpose a technology already in play within the adult acute or even the pediatric acute environment, for which they see an opportunity to address our challenges and then again to provide them with the appropriate environment to validate that. For that program, we're still going through the selection process, but our plan is to select 4 recipients who will receive up to $600,000 and have up to 18 months to do validation testing, whether it's in our environment or amongst our network of partners, whatever is the appropriate environment for that testing. These are obviously, as I said, industry partners, so these are not necessarily healthcare providers per se, but the partner that they will work with is a healthcare partner, and our funding goes to that healthcare partner, not to the industry applicant, in part because that funding is going to help reimburse and cover a lot of the costs that the care provider has to address as our innovation, if you will, disrupts their ecosystem over that period of time. So we're trying to sort of support the partners as well as the industry partner. The third program is our Research Clinician Partnership Program. And while it may sound somewhat obvious, what oftentimes doesn't happen in innovation, certainly coming out of the academic healthcare institutions, is that you've got great researchers, brilliant researchers conceptualizing ideas, but they're not actually engaging the clinician at the bedside who has to actually apply that into care or understand the impact of that innovation in the care environment. And so this program almost forces them to come together, again, over the course of 18 months, potentially with an industry partner, because the idea is that if they're successful at the end of the day, they must be able to scale up rapidly into commercialization, so there's broad dissemination of this concept. Jane, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe each recipient will get up to $400,000.
It's up to 600.
Up to 600,000 as well. The fourth program, which we just launched on Monday formally, is called our Knowledge Mobilization Partnership Program. This is a bit different from the others in that it recognizes that in many cases these innovative ideas that are developed within one institution, oftentimes that knowledge is only contained there and doesn't get disseminated more broadly across the healthcare ecosystem to benefit many more players and ultimately have a substantive impact on reshaping the delivery of care. And so what this is designed to do is allow institutions the opportunity to build, in the broadest sense of the word, training programs that then can be disseminated across the ecosystem to not just mobilize and disseminate that knowledge, but to facilitate adoption into actual practice. Again, reshaping the entire thinking around the delivery and ultimately, hopefully, having a much more sustainable impact on the delivery of care when it comes to dealing with those seniors dealing with cognitive impairment.
Wow, great, thank you. And you
Oh,
mentioned...
sorry, that's $250,000 per.
Got it. The $600,000 program, I mean, that's larger than a lot of the seed stage investments that we see from angels sometimes. But I'm seeing a common trend here. That's it's not just the money part, it's the collaboration piece that you enable. You have a network of 14 providers, but really any provider in Canada can apply for these funds along with the innovators, is that correct?
No, with ours as well, we also allow for international applicants as well, but they must partner with a Canadian partner, given our funding sources from the federal and the provincial government. One of the partners has to be a Canadian, and one of the test sites must be a Canadian.
Great. I just have 2 more questions, one for Victor and one for you, Adam, coming back to you. But Victor, you've you mentioned you've been around for about 18 months now, and it's a fantastic first step for Ontario to be doing this health innovation strategy work. And you've been basically spending the past 18 months looking at various different programs, like the ones we presented now. What's next? What are some of the areas of focus your office will tackle next?
So yeah, I think as a first step, it's obviously building on the work that's already been done. So you have the first cohort of HTF launched, you have the innovation brokers hired. My role specifically in the office as the health system planning side, I tend to deal more with the insight-based questions I ask are how do we, as a health system, be a better client for innovation? How do we more unfundable? How do we create the environment and incentives? Are we willing to start taking on more advanced contracting and procurement models in order to be that driver for innovation? And I think that's really where you'll see our focus for the next year. Especially on the procurement side, because that's really where we have the strongest mandate in that shift to value-based procurement, continuing these conversations. So I mentioned the idea of paying for value, procuring for value, measuring for value. You see that more and more in how Bill speaks as well. I think along those lines, some of the things we really learned along the way and that really impressed me were how excited people were for this kind of work. Right? Like we're a small office. We don't deliver care. We don't deliver the programming. We have wonderful colleagues at the table who have done an amazing, amazing job of actually stepping into these roles. But what we're really seeing is, we became the face of the industry, the Ministry of Health overnight, and we expected the floodgates to open, and certainly there was a high volume of interest. But what really impressed me was just how willing people were to partner. Right? It wasn't industry investors coming forward and saying, get me into the system. It was saying, help me help you. We have knowledge from other jurisdictions on how to perform some of these more advanced procurements. We have knowledge on how to incorporate some of our best practices to help you as a client be a better client. And I think that's really the area that we want to focus. We know the knowledge is out there. It's not new. We're not inventing value-based procurement. We're not inventing value-based care. I think what we're learning to do is take advantage of Ontario's very strong institutions, public sector assets, our health system as an asset, vast data stores, an incredible biomedical and health innovation ecosystem. You can see it just outside here what we have to offer, and trying to translate that into something that is of value to investors to say Ontario is the place. Right? We have this capacity to grow our companies. We have the capacity to help find a reference customer here, build their exports, and be the job creator of the future. Here too in a nutshell.
Thanks, Victor. And one final question before I open it up to the floor for you, Adam. There are a lot of investors in the room, a lot of companies. How do they get involved in the impact investing world? Is the social impact bond an appropriate vehicle? How else can they get engaged?
Sure. I just described one tool. And it's actually a pretty niche tool. So there's one nationally. We're working on several different deals. Some are in the area of health. If you want to try to find those deals, it's going to be very difficult unless you're coming through our doors. There's other impact investment deals that are, less complicated, more accessible to impact investors. We have a platform. It's called the Social Venture Exchange. This is a regulated platform by our Securities Commission that helps broker impact investors with impact investment deals. Either direct deals, so into a health venture technology, or into a fund that then invests into deals. So I suggest you look up svx.org. That's a way to look at those deals. You have to be an accredited investor, I should just say that, in order to see these deals. And then there's angel alliances. It's very similar to traditional angel lists, and there's ways to find these deals by word of mouth. It's actually quite a small impact investment field. The field of impact investment is actually quite small in Canada, so by 1 or 2 degrees of separation, I think you could probably find who's looking for money. And our team has been doing this for 5 years, so I'd like to think that we can help you source those deals.
Great. Thank you very much for that. I want to open it up to the floor to see if there are any questions for our panel. question? Everybody's waiting for the reception? Everybody's got their drink ticket ready to go? Yes. Can you tell us who you are and your question, please?
I'm from Cosette L, and we operating a Cosette Lab, and we have a lot of success about startup, but overall in any category. And I realized that startup in health is like another category. Like I could talk to you about experience of successful product, but no buyers. The doctor will not invest money, the clinic will not invest money, and the government will not invest money, and eventually it's looked like a lot more difficult. That's I would like to have your comment. That's the lesson I have in my mind. To find the money and to be successful, because it's not simple, more simpler in health, it's more complicated.
I can make a stab at the start of
Sure.
that. I
Yeah.
suspect others are going to need, and you hit the nail on the head. And I've heard on several other panels today as well as yesterday. If the scientist or the entrepreneur, whomever it is developing these ideas, make sure it's actually addressing a need today, basically. As much as you want to be forward-thinking and innovative, and what is the healthcare challenge of 10 years from now, the reality of the healthcare system nowadays, whether it's Canada or other jurisdictions, is that the cost of care continues to go up, as does the chronic nature of many conditions, certainly in the senior space, but even the nature of the acute conditions as well. Whomever is conceptualizing the ideas needs to make sure they're in tune with what needs to be in place now to manage the care now. Or otherwise, no investor's going to put the money in there, no doctor's going to acquire it, because it doesn't actually meet a need they've got physically. That means the investor or the entrepreneur needs to get out there and do their research. Don't just sit in your garage or your lab, wherever it is, and come up with these great ideas. I'll give you a bit of an example of where one of my pet peeves is in terms of some of what we're hearing or seeing. So when we put these challenges out, we get people across the age spectrum coming forward with ideas. But almost invariably, the younger people are coming up with app solutions, which is great if for those of us who have iPads and our BlackBerries within apps, we're used to it. But they're not thinking about the potential target audience for this, which is in many cases seniors who don't have an iPad, don't even know what an app is, and what does this solution actually do? Very little chance that it's going to be successful or sustainable in the long run. Speak to the people that are actually doing the delivery of care or have the challenge to understand what their need is. Then they're going to come up with something that meets the need, which is going to be more attractive to the investors at the end of the day. I can make some of these comments in large part because my background is in medical. I spent 25 years in corporate finance and strategy consultancy. I worked with a number of startup companies, helping them trying to access capital. And one of my biggest frustration points was the scientists that wouldn't listen to the business person that actually understood what they needed to do to become successful at the end of the day. And so, there is great opportunities, there's great science in Canada and Ontario and around the world. If it was not actually meeting the need now, it's never going to be successful, even though it might be a great idea for 10 years from now. I'll stop there, but I'm not sure if anybody else wants to.
I can add a comment about one of the biggest bottlenecks for many of these companies, the procurement. And this panel talked about a number of initiatives that are taking place here in Ontario that is supposed to tackle that bottleneck and really get rid of it. So the REACH program is allowing hospitals now to try and experiment with new approaches to acquire these new technologies and innovations that RFPs typically exclude them from. Procurement by Co-Design that Mars run, again, similar story. It allows people to collaborate together, to evaluate using outcome-based methodologies to ultimately procure. And Victor, you mentioned new initiatives that are coming out in the next 12 months that allow, again, more flexibility in terms of procurement. Right now, we're very restricted in how hospitals procure, but some of these initiatives will exactly tackle that issue of how do we buy these new technologies.
And then
So,
maybe I just want to add to the comment, specifically, what you were saying is definitely important. You need to make sure that the technology is addressing a challenge. It is a solution. However, a lot of the hurdles are that you can't, the company is unable to test their technology in the end site. So if it's a hospital, they don't have the opportunity to have the doors open where they can actually demonstrate it, showcase it, build evidence for potential adoption at that site or other sites. So Health Technologies Fund is a good opportunity to allow companies that haven't had that opportunity before, that haven't been able to gain any evidence, Ontario evidence specifically, which is really important. So I think, we're getting there slowly, and I have a few examples from a program that was sort of like the predecessor to the Health Technologies Fund, which those projects are slowly starting to finish now, and they, many of them have made physical sales. Some have built evidence, and they are working towards closing sales. So it's happening, but it'll still be a ways away.
I think if I could build off of Jennifer's point as well, our next generation programs are, we're going to evolve them basically to address a number of the things that everybody's talked about here, but working with our partners to specifically identify key immediate challenges that they've got, design the programs around that, and then, as you were describing, Victor, ensuring that there is a value-based procurement model built into that as well, so that if successful, they will be acquired, or the solution will be acquired as well. So again, it's going right into actual practice, but it's meeting it.
You had a question or a comment?
Well, Raymond answered it. I mean, I think one of the challenges in the entrepreneurs,
You set me up.
is that it's death by pilot. So it takes a long time to get a health company to maturity and to get it to commercialization. It's a long time. Lots of money needs to be invested. And now, with kind of some of the procurement models, especially in the U.S., where they're in organizations, it's a 5-year cycle before they look at things again. It's, and they're trying to see the value by, offering clinical validation sites. I think is like a big thing we're hearing a lot of from Cleveland Clinic, from the Mayo, and they're all, because they can't procure again for another 5 years because it doesn't come up again. So there's this huge death by pilot issue that's going on right now. And so, actually, when you did answer for saying you need to take it right to the end, I find a lot of these programs just go to, it's a great test of a procurement model, but their procurement team actually isn't at the table when you're actually running these tests. So in the end, it's still not
the
procurement.
program in the first place.
Right, exactly. So but anyway, that was a beautiful answer.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's a question, but it's a response to your question, and that this view that there's a lot of noise out there, and how do you see healthcare companies that you can invest in that will make a difference? And I think you're right. It's if you meet a market need and you've been able to choose that sector or that part of healthcare that needs satisfying. So a few of you on the panel are doing a great job on healthcare tech oriented spots. And if you think about a couple of areas like home care, community care, you might think about mental health and some of the data and the assessments that need to be done in that sector. And you think about pharmacy working with primary care, right? Some of that information going back and forth. You might find some value. You might find some companies that are very, very focused on the market needs in those other sectors. An example I have in my background is a company called QHR, which was an electronic medical records business. And it, in its earlier days, tried to figure out where is the value in the market, and it was primary care, and then it became specialists in primary care and building systems and information for those folks as a nuts and bolts business, right? And it was just sold to shoppers for $200 million. And they will use that technology and that met need in the market to move it over into pharmacy and community and timing the community as well. So look for those. Look for the building blocks and those really simple business needs that are met by the players in the sector as you talked about.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes?
I was gonna ask Adam the question around the social impact bond or that kind of model. Is there, maybe this is a dumb question, but is there any assessment of the sustainability of the, like, what kind of work do you do to see if the, whatever program it is, there's a
Like how
sustainability?
long, like if they can, if the changes that they go through in terms of behavior modification, whether those will continue through the life after
Yes.
the program.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. You know, the fact of the matter is the program's being funded for 4 years. We're going to track the results over 4 years. There is a bit of a leap of faith that we're taking, that we're going to try to incentivize behavior modification through, you know, different means, different rewards. We're hoping that we're going to change people's perspective on those different health dimensions, but we can't continually track these individuals for life. So we haven't found a way to tackle that issue, but we kind of hope that showing or motivating people up front will enable that action down the road.
So it's a leap of faith.
It is a bit of a leap of faith, yeah.
Okay.
In line with that, I'm just curious from a data set perspective, what are the stipulations around where you get that data from, especially now, and obviously wearables and all this stuff is happening, but I'm just curious for the investor piece taking on some of that risk, I'm sure they're really curious on where the data is being tracked. Really
Yeah.
curious.
So in this program, there's going to be a couple different interfaces. So the individual is going to actually come through Shoppers Drug Mart locations.
Okay.
So that's where the Heart and Stroke Foundation will have staff working with the individuals. So there's going to be a data point there, because my guess is that the individual will have a Shoppers Drug Mart or a Loblaws PC Point Optimum card. We're going to be able to track purchases and consumer consumption through the Shoppers Drug Mart channel. As it relates to their health, they're going to consent to giving their health information to the project as a part of participating. So I think by the end of it, there's going to be some rich data sets collected. We're planning to work with 30,000 people, so it's not a small sample size in this case.
And with that, I want to thank the panel for contributing and sharing their programs and ideas. Please reach out if you think you're a company that can leverage some of these programs, or an investor that has something in your portfolio that can leverage some of these programs. So thank you so much for being with us, and let's go drink.